Alright, we are ready to go. What's going on, Brandon?
Hello.
Hello. That Ouroboros the Ninja. So, yeah, guys, we're just going to give you a little sneak peek. Dark Souls 3 Q&A kind of thing. Now, in a perfect world, Brandon and I would have played the game at this point, but unfortunately it was in the middle of the week that the event took place and Brandon was in school, so I went in his stead.
Yeah.
And so basically we're just going to do like a little Q&A between him and I, and we're just going to talk about the stuff we saw in the E3 demo, which we both saw together, and then how that compares to my experience with the actual gameplay of Dark Souls 3. And like I said, we can get into really specific combat mechanics and like buttons and all that stuff. So this, like I said, guys, this is going to be a really informal, we're just chatting, shooting the shit essentially, and hopefully by the end of the video, you guys will have a pretty good understanding of the advanced feel of the gameplay mechanics. So since we are both PvP nuts, I tried to focus on anything that would be relevant to fighting other players. I don't care about the lore. I don't care about the boss fights and
the lore.
But the lore, yeah.
The weapon descriptions, did you write them down?
Yeah, there were. But yeah, and then we can get as specific as we want. We can kind of go from there. So Brandon, what is the first thing? What is the one burning question you have about Dark Souls 3?
All right, so I want to start from the beginning.
Sure.
Okay. So how much time did you have with the game?
We had about an hour and a half to play the game, and it was comprised of one level that was about the size of the Berg. Actually, it was probably a little bit bigger than that. There was a lot more like areas you could go to, but I would say it is about as similar to the Berg in the feel and the verticality and stuff as you could get.
Very cool. Okay.
Yeah, and unfortunately it was on Xbox One controllers.
Oh,
we were playing a PC build, but we were using goddamn Xbox One controllers. That was my first time ever using an Xbox One controller. Dude, why is the R1 so hard to press? Dude, I couldn't even R1 spam. I'm like, Brandon's not gonna like this shit. Like,
it is a bit.
Yeah, it was a struggle, man. But other than that, it was whatever. But yeah, the stupid R1 was like stiff or something. Maybe it was just the controller I had. But I was like, wow, this controller's a piece of shit. I'm glad I'm like married to Sony, like ever. But yeah, so we had about an hour and a half to play.
Okay. Okay. So, did you test? So, I'm going to ask you, like, really fucked up questions.
Whatever you want, man. Whatever you want.
Nerdy people like me.
Yes, that's exactly what this video is. That's why in the corner of the video it says Combat Mechanics Q&A. Yeah. This is not about anything else. It's like, yeah. This is not for casual IGN journalists. This is for people who are going to PvP for 3 years and you know, actually carry this game's legacy onward. So, yeah.
Yeah, fair enough.
Whatever you want to know.
Okay, so did you test out toggling?
Yes.
Toggle escaping as it was in Dark Souls 1.
Yes. Toggle escaping, as far as I can tell, is gone. It does not exist in Dark Souls 3.
Can't imagine they would put it in after taking it out from Dark Souls 2.
Exactly. Toggle escaping in Dark Souls 1, in PvP, was obviously very straightforward. You just mash the direction, or you time the direction on the D-pad for when someone attacks you and you escape a stun lock. In PvE, it was always kind of weird. Like, if you did full-on toggle escaping against, like, a zombie that was hitting you, sometimes you'd escape the stagger, sometimes you wouldn't, but it was definitely there. Dark Souls 3, there is no evidence whatsoever of toggle escaping.
But you did try it.
I did try it, yes. Yeah, I definitely tried it on both characters, because we got to play one of two characters. One looked kind of like an elite knight. He had a long sword, a kite shield, and like the kind of fluted armor from the trailer.
You had the one with the crown too, right?
No, he didn't. He didn't have a crown. It wasn't the one from the E3 demo. It wasn't the Red Knight. It was a different guy.
Oh, it was different.
And then the other guy was what was called a northern warrior, and he had like kind of like the barbarian, like Viking kind of look. So he had like heavy leather armor, like a kind of a dumb looking helm that like someone from like the north would wear, and he had like a what looked like a bandit axe almost, and 2 different pancake shields. So he had a big pancake shield and a little pancake shield, both leather. And yeah, so no toggle escaping. That is absolutely gone.
Okay. You couldn't access the menus or anything.
We could access the menus for like the settings menu, but we couldn't actually access the inventory
stats,
or anything.
no equipment.
No stats, no equipment. Everything you
Damn.
picked up during the gameplay demo was just automatically put in your inventory.
Okay.
So that meant if you picked up 4 weapons, you just had 4 weapons in your right
you're
hand that you
shitting
could
me.
switch. Now that doesn't mean there's
That
going to be
doesn't
4
mean it's gonna
weapon
be in the
slots.
final
No,
game.
no, no.
Yeah,
I think it
I
was
don't
just
think
a way for people to try all the different items and stuff. Same with consumables. If you picked up a consumable item, it went into your item like slot, and you could cycle to it, but you couldn't actually like drop it or read anything about it.
Okay.
But the settings menu was pretty much fully fleshed out. It had all the standard things like the contrast slider. You could change your jump from B to the R3 or whatever, L3 for the jump toggle.
Right, thank God.
Oh yeah, and they had like, you know, the move the camera rate, which was set to 5, like the sensitivity and all that stuff. So
Okay.
so, and the interface was there. We did have a health bar and
Oh,
a stamina
shit.
bar and weapon arts, a sword art meter, which I'll get into a little bit later,
Oh, yeah, I have
and stuff like
questions
that. And it looked good. It was a really nice looking interface. It was very similar to Dark Souls 1 and 2, just, you know, a little more sleek and a few extra spaces on it, because obviously there are more things in this game. Combat goes quite a bit deeper in Dark Souls 3 than it did in any of the other games.
That's good though. That's fucking awesome.
Oh yeah.
Did it look cluttered?
No,
Was
not
there
at all.
Too much shit, or did
No,
they still
no,
have
no.
it minimalistic?
No, because it was just your. I didn't see a humanity bar or meter or anything like that, but it was just your health, your stamina, and your sword arts
Okay.
number.
All right. Well, I can imagine it'll be different.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So talking about the weapons.
Yes.
How many weapons were there? How many weapons did you?
In the
to
demo, the two starting character classes started with either a longsword or what I imagine was like a
right?
bandit axe. It was a
Yeah.
bit bigger than a hand axe, but a bit smaller than a battle axe. So it was something in between. And the knight character started with a kite shield, like it was, you know, in the shape of like a kite, and the northern warrior started with 2 different leather shields, a small leather shield and like what looked like a medium leather shield. Then the weapons that you could find, the first one was the greatsword. It looked just like the greatsword from Dark Souls 1, but it had this Zweihander moveset, which I found
Right.
really interesting.
And was it really fast, like we suspected?
It was fast-ish. It was faster than the Dark Souls 1
Yeah.
Zweihander. You know, probably the equivalent of like whatever was in Dark Souls 2, but it wasn't like Claymore fast or anything like that. It was
Alright.
it was still an ultra great sword.
I see.
Like when you did the R1, your character like took a stance and fucking like swung for the fences. Like it was
Yeah.
like that. And the next weapon was the Legion scimitars.
Oh,
So
shit.
we've talked about that before, but in case anyone doesn't know, I'll kind of refresh your memory. Legion scimitars is a stack of weapons that you find. So it's 2 scimitars, but they count as 1 weapon slot. So you pick it up and it goes in your right hand weapon slot, and when you're just holding, like let's say a shield in your left hand, you have a scimitar in your right hand and there's another scimitar on your side. If you push triangle, or in this case Y for the Xbox
it's a
One or
two-hand.
whatever. Yeah, the 2-hand button,
But you
you
start
don't
dual-wielding.
end up two-handing it like say a falchion or anything like that. You end up with 1 in each hand. So that's the dual wield.
So that's what I expected.
Yeah, and nowhere did we see any sort of power stance or like hold Y to activate something. There was no holding Y at all. So power stance per se is gone, but it's actually been absorbed into another thing, which I'll explain as we get deeper into combat mechanics. But yeah, so the Legion Scimitar was the second one. Unfortunately, there was no short bow, which made me
Really?
sad. Yeah, the short bow was
it
what
looks
everyone
so
was excited
cool.
for, because that was in the
They have it
E3
in the
demo.
trailer.
Yeah, I know. That was in the E3 demo. It definitely was not in this gameplay. So there was no short bow.
Legolas mode.
Yeah, exactly. But the 2 weapons that we were able to find As far as I can tell, were the Great Sword and the Legion Scimitars. And if I can remember another one, I'll let you know. But that I think that's all we had in that area. Yeah.
All right. What about the consumables?
Okay, so consumables, we found throwing knives and fire bombs, just regular fire bombs, not black fire bombs. And I think that was it. There were a few consumable souls. I didn't see how many souls they gave you because it didn't really matter because you didn't get an opportunity to level up or anything like that. But I think there was like a soul of a lost undead or whatever kicking around here and there. But the two consumables we got were fire bombs and throwing knives, and this is definitely worth talking about because a lot of people have asked and begged for consumable weapons to finally be viable in a sense that they're useful all the time. Like, for instance, in Dark Souls 1, I find fire bombs to be very useful all the time. You can free aim a fire bomb and, you know, hit someone without locking on and all that stuff. It's fairly quick, good blast radius, etc. But in Dark Souls 1, I found throwing knives to be almost entirely garbo. Like, you know, throwing knives were so... You could just walk strafe and avoid them, and they were just kind of bullshit. In Dark Souls 3, both throwing knives and fire bombs are entirely viable. The fire bomb from Dark Souls 1 is back in every way. You can free throw it through a window as long as you practice aiming. The original Dark Souls 1 style free throw is back. Which is fucking awesome, and I hope they bring it back for I hope they bring it back for things like fireballs and stuff as well.
I'm sure they will.
Oh yeah. So fire bombs are back entirely, and throwing knives are now amazing. Throwing knives have really good tracking. You throw them really fast. They're great for PvE. Like, they track enemies right at the end of the throwing animation. So if an enemy is strafing, you're not going to throw the knife where they were standing when you initially pressed square or X or whatever to throw. It'll actually throw it at them wherever they're standing when you release the dagger or the throwing knife, if that makes any sense. So if somebody's like strafing, at least at a slow speed, you're going to hit them with a throwing knife. If they're running horizontally, you probably won't hit them. But what it means is that in combat, if someone's throwing knives at you, you don't... Like, you actually need to react to them, which I found really nice. At one point, I was up in these rafters, throwing knives at dogs. I like the standard FromSoft demon dog.
Rabid asshole.
Dog. And I was hitting them even as he was freaking out and like going into a tantrum and trying to like pathfind to me. I was like hitting him with every throwing knife. When's the last time you were able to hit a dog running or scampering around like at full speed with a throwing knife from above? But true enough, it hit. And firebomb. So for those of you out there that are envisioning creating the ultimate like ninja build with like consumables and all sorts of gadgets and shit, they will be viable in Dark Souls 3. It's not like the shot put firebomb from Dark Souls 2 where your guy throws it like it's a bowling ball that weighs like 30 pounds. Like, your guy throws it like a baseball as opposed to a shot put, which I found much better. Just more fun. Dark Souls 2, I found it really difficult to free aim consumables. You had to pretty much lock on exclusively. At least I did. And it was hard. You couldn't really throw them at your feet. Whereas in Dark Souls 1, if you aim down with a throwing or with a firebomb, you will throw it right at your feet, which is great for catching people that are trying to roll backstab you or whatever. So consumables are awesome, but in the demo we only got throwing knives and firebombs.
Okay. What about magic? There was no magic, right?
There was the hint of magic. So there was a mini boss. There was a mini boss in the demo that was optional, and he's this big, huge, like, Smo-looking motherfucker. I think he's in the gameplay trailer. He's this big, fat guy with, like, a giant mace or something. And he actually had 3 different soul-style spells. One looked like soul... What the fuck is it? Not shower. What's the... Soul geyser? One looked like Soul Geyser, one looked like Soul Spear, and another one looked like an AoE kind of... Almost like a Wog. But it was like a blue soul spell?
Soul Wog?
Yeah, something like that. And that's the only hint of magic that was in the whole demo. You don't get any starting, and no other enemy used magic on you. other than like the boss, the dancer or whatever had like buffed swords and everything like that.
Right.
Oh, speaking of which, there were consumables. There was a pine resin for your sword.
Oh shit!
Yeah.
Did
So
you use it?
I did. Yeah, and it
How
just
did it look?
makes fire on your sword. It looks great. It looks a lot better than it does in Dark Souls 1. Like it actually looks like if you lit a sword on fire with like I compare it to in
Bloodborne, maybe?
yeah, well, you know, in Game of Thrones when they're in the cave and the Hound is fighting that priest guy or whatever,
Yeah,
and he
fucking
dips
buffs
his
his
sword in the
sword.
fire, and it looks actually like fire coming from a sword, but not just this ridiculous fire effect, but it actually looks like the fire is like lit from the base of the sword and going up. That's what it looked like. So it looked really
Nice.
good.
I'm interested in those buffs, you know.
Definitely. Oh, of course, man. You gotta get your R1 on.
R1, but better be DMV
Fuck
felt.
yeah.
Alright, so, what about bonfire mechanics? I know this isn't exactly combat related, but...
Yeah, no, that's fine. All mechanics are mechanics. There were 2 bonfires in the demo, and you just light them like you do in Dark Souls 1, and the only option when you click on them was leave bonfire. But obviously sitting down at a bonfire reset all the enemies and gave you your health back. But it didn't replenish your sword arts, which we're about to get into, which is like the in-depth Dark Souls combat
Yeah,
stuff.
I was gonna ask you, like, they're adding this entire new thing.
Yep.
Like, how is it?
Well, first, let's cover something that I know everybody wants to hear: backstabs and parries.
Backstabs!
Yeah. So let's start with backstabs. So a lot of people saw the trailer and they were like, "Holy shit! Instant backstabs are back," which is, you know, a good and a bad thing for a lot of people. It's a double-edged sword. Some people love the instant backstabs because it gives you the ability to deal with much stronger builds or gankers, or, you know, getting yourself into an invincibility window is sometimes good, but it also sucks if there's bad netcode, if you're fighting someone from the other side of the world, if someone's just, you know, if their dad is downloading too much balloon porn, whatever the case is, you know, instant backstabs can be bad. But the backstabs in Dark Souls 3 are not quite that. You have to be directly behind your opponent to land a backstab in Dark Souls 3. The window is very narrow. In Dark Souls 1, you could almost backstab people from the side. Like, it was pretty much a 45-degree angle all the way to the other flank. Like it was a cone behind someone that allowed you to suck them into a backstab. And we know this because we all used it and we all countered it and got backstabbed by that very same mechanic a million times. Dark Souls 3, you have to be directly behind your opponent to get a backstab. It's a very finicky window. Like, it's to the point where, you know, I've played thousands of hours of Dark Souls, and I was having a hard time backstabbing, like, the zombies in the starting area.
Really?
Yeah, man. Part of it is they're super aggressive. If you watch the gameplay trailer, you can see how aggressive the enemies are. But just getting behind them was one thing. But getting in that perfect window to backstab them was so hard. Like, I found myself over-rotating or under-rotating all the time. Which I think is good, because it means that backstabbing is going to be tricky and it's going to require practice, and it's not going to be something that you can just fish out of someone very easily. Meaning that, yeah, they may never fix the netcode, yeah, they may never fix, you know, various things about how players interact, but the very least what they've added is a much smaller backstab window. Like, it feels like a quarter of the size of the Dark Souls 1 backstab window. And obviously it's nothing like the Dark Souls 2 backstab with the like the setup punch or whatever you want to call it. There's no setup. It's instant, but it's now this could have just been the demo I was playing, but it felt a little bit delayed, meaning you got back there and you clicked a button and your guy would like start to swing and then it would initiate the backstab animation. And I don't know if that's just latency from the PC build or if it's something they haven't fully finished, but so are backstabs instant? Yes. Are backstabs the same as Dark Souls 1? Not quite, in that they're a lot trickier to land on a regular basis. Unless you're fighting a really big opponent. Like, there's a mini boss you could butt stab, essentially. He was pretty easy to backstab because once you got behind him, you had his whole back So, you know, he was very easy to backstab, whereas a standard character the same size as you, like one of the knights from the trailer, huge fucking pain in the ass to backstab, and if you tried, you usually got dunked. Because they would turn and just do like a 7-hit combo, and you just put the controller down and walk away, so... So yeah, backstabs, in my opinion, are better. They're less brutal than in Dark Souls 1, but they're a lot more... They're a lot tighter than Dark Souls 1. So I think it's an improvement, but again, you know, mileage will vary. Some people love Dark Souls 1 instant backstabs. Some people like yourself hate it.
Yeah,
and it's definitely a middle ground, which I think is the best you can ask for.
I think that's a really good thing, as long as somehow the netcode isn't so bad.
Of course.
You know, they still somehow get it out.
Definitely.
And that leads me to another question before we get into sword arts.
Yep.
Was there Poise?
Yes. I more or less confirmed Poise. But hang on. It's hard. It's, you know, like, to say is there Poise is like saying Dark Souls 1 had Poise and Dark Souls 2 didn't have Poise, right? Because a lot of people said it had a sort of Poise. Exactly. It had a Poise system.
Well, a way to walk through attacks reliably.
Yes. So in Dark Souls 3, if you were fighting... So, I'll use an example. I was playing the knight character, the character that looked like he was wearing elite knight armor or fluted knight armor or whatever. And one of the starting hollow guys who came at me with like his short sword or whatever, it would take him 2 swings to stagger me. The first one I was able to ignore, and the second one would stagger me. And it felt like it had a refill system in a sense that if he hit me once, and then I waited a few seconds, and then he hit me again, I would still Poise through it. But if he hit me once, and then a second later hit me again, I would stagger the second time. Okay. So I think that's more or less confirmation of like standard Dark Souls 1 Poise. Yeah. But there's no way to really tell without a menu and without seeing numbers and stuff, because, you know, Dark Souls 2 felt like it had standard Poise, but then it had something different. You know, I'm not going to say whether or not it has Poise or doesn't have Poise, but it's definitely different.
It's got something.
Yeah, exactly. It's got something. But I mean, in Dark Souls 1, you can't stagger Havel with a dagger, but in Dark Souls 2, you can, and that's why I say it had something. But Dark Souls 3 looks like it has the standard Poise break system. Yeah. And a lot of the enemies had crazy hyper armor. Like, obnoxious fucking bullshit hyper armor. Like, I had my greatsword, and I'd fucking come in there with a greatsword R1, two-handed, and there'd be like these hollows that had like big battle axes, and if that guy was in the middle of like a big power attack, he would just Poise right through my greatsword. So I think it's hybridized. I think like kind of like Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 2, it's a combination of Poise and hyper armor for various super heavy weapons. I should also point out that the heavy weapons are all sped up. There was no attack that felt unviable.
That's really
and there's also charge attacks, but I mean, we'll cover that in a little bit.
Yeah. Rolling was just like Dark Souls.
Rolling was absolutely identical.
It seems like everything. Yeah.
So leading up to our trip to Napa, I played a lot of Dark Souls 1. Just because I knew the game was going to feel like that. I knew it was based off of Dark Souls 1. I'm like, I got to play the shit out of Dark Souls 1 and then go there and just like see if it's a continuation. Dark Souls 3 feels like a really good DLC for Dark Souls 1. Meaning, as soon as I load it in, even though I was using a controller I've never used before, and I'm like, you know, it's a brand new game, I was immediately sprinting around and jumping onto railings and like rolling off of things, and the timing, the spacing, the distance of the jump, the roll distance, the snappiness of all the animations was exactly like Dark Souls 1.
Oh, that makes me really happy.
Yeah, like, that was the very first thing I did. My goal was to sit down and immediately try running around at full speed and see how clumsy I was. Because that's the best way you can tell if the game is familiar or not. Right. And I didn't feel clumsy at all. I was able to just, like, fully sprint around the areas and, like, you know, dodge and weave through enemies and roll through big, heavy attacks instantly. Like, the roll timing is identical to Dark Souls 1. It feels like you get the same amount of iframes. Everything just feels like Dark Souls 1. And that's why I will continue to say, until I play the game, that Dark Souls 3 feels like an awesome Dark Souls 1 DLC. So Somebody
the Dark Souls 2.
trademarked that line. Yeah.
It's
Sorry.
like the Dark Souls 2 that everybody wanted.
Yeah, that's what it feels like to me. That's what it felt like. Also omnidirectional attacks, but that was a given. If you roll past something, if you roll past something and swing behind you, you'll actually swing behind you. Same with like Bloodborne, how you can attack in any direction instantly, whereas in Dark Souls 2 you had like a 180 at best. Yeah, you could attack in like a cone in front of you, and you had to rotate your body to be able to attack stuff behind you, which was a lot of people's complaint of why it felt so slow. Whether or not it's more realistic is hard to say, but it definitely felt... Dark Souls 3 felt faster in every way than Dark Souls 2. Not quite as fast as Bloodborne, mostly because rolling is very punishing to your stamina bar. In Bloodborne, even a starting character can dash, like 10 times, 12 times?
It's fucking ridiculous.
Yeah, in Dark Souls 3, you get about the same amount of stamina as you do in Dark Souls 1 with a starting character, so you can roll like 4 times or 5 times, and and sprinting. So here was a pretty major change with regards to stamina management. In Dark Souls 2, if you sprint for about 3 seconds, your character has to stop and pull out his puffer and catch his breath, and he needs to just sit down on a stump and chill for a bit. Yeah, have some water out of his ale skin or whatever.
Some Estus.
Yeah, some Estus. But in Dark Souls 1, you could sprint a very long time, but every action cost a lot more stamina. That's what this is like. Every swing, every roll, every jump, all that is a huge chunk of stamina, whereas running and like sprinting is very cheap for your stamina bar. So that's the way I prefer it, because I like being able to run from gankers and have like big chases and chase down opponents and all that stuff. So rolls and jumps and swings and all that take a fairly substantial chunk from your stamina bar, but just running around doesn't.
Okay, so there's definitely going to be a lot of stamina management in this
game. Yeah.
That's good.
I fucked
That's
up pretty
good.
Bad sometimes. And it's one of those situations where if you have a tiny sliver of stamina and you do something like an ultra greatsword swing, it goes into the negative, meaning...
and you sit there for like an hour.
You sit there for like 38 years waiting for just the tiniest amount of stamina to come back. So, yeah, stamina management is very important. But I think it's been important in every Souls game.
Oh, yeah.
For sure, so, yeah.
Okay, very cool. Now what about sword arts?
Okay, so sword arts.
Good stuff.
Yeah, the good stuff. So first, I want to start by saying sword arts is the new combat mechanic that is introduced in Dark Souls 3. It is a combination of Dark Souls 2 power stance and Bloodborne's charge attack system. So that's what it is. It's a combination of those two things, which is cool. Now, I'll also say it's entirely optional. At no point was I disadvantaged or really advantaged for using or not using sword arts. Meaning, if you ignore the L2 button, which is how you activate sword arts, unless you have a shield that can parry, as long as you don't have a parrying shield in your left hand, L2 will activate sword arts. At no point was I required to use sword arts. I actually forgot about it most of the time, and it just felt like Dark Souls 1 in every way. Dark Souls 1, you've got your R1, you've got your R2, you've got your rolling R1, your running R1, your running R2, which actually there's a really cool added mechanic about running R2s now. But I didn't even realize that sword arts were a thing. Like, I knew they existed, but I forgot about them for half my playthrough. And I'm just running around, R1ing and kiting and parrying and backstabbing my enemies. And then I was like, oh shit, there's this whole new thing that I can do with sword arts. Then I started using that, and, everything got a whole lot fancier and complicated. But at no point was I like, damn, I would have really done better if I had had some sword arts to go along with that. Like, it's a thing that I feel like is... like I said, entirely optional and will benefit PvP a lot.
PvP more so.
PvP is going to be fucking awesome now, because you can chain sword arts into your normal attack combos. So you can do like an R1, like you could go R1, R1, L2, R2. And if you have enough stamina, your guy's going to do like for instance, let's say you had the Legion scimitars. Your guy's gonna go like regular swing, regular back swing, fancy pants dancing, swishing fucking dance
Sword
attack
out,
into like heavy double attack with the scimitars for your R2. So it's like it combat can be as slow and methodical as, you know, a new player will want, or as crazy as your stamina bar will allow. So I think PvP is going to be really exciting. So Sword Arts is shown by there's a little icon underneath your health bar and stamina bar that it's a little, from what I remember, it was a little shield, and it starts at 20, or at least for the demo you started with 20, and it will deplete as you use Sword Arts, and it was different amounts for different things. Like if you're using the Legion Scimitar and you do like a dancy, fancy pants attack, yeah, it would take like 1 point off. But if you did
only
like
one?
yeah, only one. But if you had like an ultra great sword and you did a super duper mega like slam attack, it would take like 3 points or something. Okay. Mostly because that does a ton of damage and can one-shot most of the standard enemies. Sword Arts also extended partially to other things like shields. It also included self-buffs for certain weapons. It was fucking crazy. Like the Northern Warrior starts with an axe and a shield. If you use L2 with the, say, heavy shield in your left hand, you actually do like a ground pound. Like you slam the ground with your shield, and it does like a short AoE like burst attack that staggers all nearby enemies. So yeah, so that was
that what we saw in the trailer?
Maybe. I think at one point in the trailer, yeah, he slams the ground.
Yeah, something like that.
And
like a force move.
yeah, and if you use L2 with the with like the Legion scimitars, you do fancy crazy attacks. If you do it with the like bandit axe, you actually do a self buff, which is, it makes your hands light on fire or something. Like your hands start glowing, and I think it makes you do more damage.
That's fucking crazy.
Yeah, and with the Ultra Greatsword, it just makes you do giant, like, gut-style, like, anime attacks. Like, where your sword has, like, a huge trailer on it, and, like, you know, you're just swinging around, and, like, you can launch enemies up in the air and all kinds of stuff like that. So it's just, it's appropriate to whatever weapon you're using. Sometimes it includes the shield, sometimes it doesn't. So, and like I said, the meter in the top corner started at 20 and it would deplete. Now, here was something interesting. I have reason to believe that there will be consumable items that will replenish your Sword Arts. The reason I say that is resting at a bonfire did not replenish your Sword Arts, but dying did. So when you died and respawned, you got all your Sword Arts back. But sitting at a bonfire would refresh everything. It'd bring the enemies back. It would, you know, do all that stuff. But and it would replenish your Estus, but it didn't replenish your Sword Arts. So it's interesting because it's kind of like bullets, you know, or vials in Bloodborne, in that it's a consumable that is used for utility in combat that everybody has, if that makes any sense. So
I don't know, it's really strange.
It is strange. It's a whole different combat mechanic that's entirely optional. Like, you can do everything from Dark Souls 1 without ever touching Sword Arts, which is really cool, actually. It's like, it's entirely optional. You don't need it to beat anything. You don't need it to fight bosses. You don't need it to win any sort of fight. But it gives you the option to have a whole new arsenal of attacks. There's also running Sword Art attacks, like at a full sprint. You do a different attack. There's like, you know, you can combo it in with your other attacks. So the Legion scimitars were the craziest, because you'd be like R1, L1, L2, and suddenly you're dancing, and then an R2, and it's just like all these attacks in such a short period of time. Yeah, so that's Sword Arts in a nutshell. Like I said, it's activated with L2, and sometimes Sword Arts will take priority over your stance, meaning normally to activate Sword Arts, you press triangle. So you have to two-hand your weapon, or put it in whatever stance triangle would normally have. So if you have a shield and a longsword, in your hand, hitting L2 will do the parry for the shield, or if it's a heavy shield, it'll do like a push or a ground pound or whatever the case is. It won't activate sword arts. But if you two-hand your longsword, then you can do sword arts with it. So yeah, there was a few like kind of instances like that. So yeah, that's sword arts in a nutshell. Or at least what I was able to deduce from sword arts. So entirely optional, flashy as hell, consumable, meaning it does deplete. I didn't see how to replenish it other than dying, so maybe there's consumables like Old Spice from Demon Souls or whatever that will like bring it back. But yeah, that's sword arts right there. And every weapon has a different thing it can do with sword arts, which is really cool. Self buffs, giant attacks, like crazy dancing attacks,
awesome.
Shield bashes, and all kinds of stuff. Yeah. So another thing came to mind about parrying. So
a lot of people want to know like how parrying is.
Parrying is identical to Dark Souls 1 in every way.
That's
it. The timing is the exact same. The animation is the exact same. The window to accidentally roll away and miss it is the same. The sound is the same. Everything is exactly the same. The only difference, and this is a shocker, is you can only parry with small shields now. And when I say small shields, I mean the equivalent of like
buckler?
buckler and target shield for sure, and then the equivalent of like say the small leather shield or the red and white shield or any tiny little like baby shield will parry. Anything bigger than that, let's say you go for
right?
yeah, anything bigger than that, like say a kite shield, will not parry with L2. If you have let's say you have a longsword in your right hand and a kite shield in your left hand, and you hit L2. The game is like, L2 with a kite shield does nothing, so we're automatically going to put you into sword arts with your right-hand weapon. So it actually just like skips that. So think of it this way. Tiny shields have two properties. Big shields have two properties. And medium shields only have one. Medium shields can only be used to block. That's it. Small shields can be used to parry and block, but they don't have a lot of stability. And great shields can be used to block or do like slam attacks or whatever the case is. But they're heavy as fuck, exactly. So
okay, that's really cool. Actually.
Yeah, it was kind of nice because parrying. I always thought that parrying was a luxury that was a trade-off based on whatever shield you chose. So I always liked that. The buckler and the target shield had special parry timings and more frames. And I always thought that, like, the small shield should have that as well, and that the heavier the shield, the less likely you were to actually slap someone's sword out of the way, just because of how heavy they are, right? So you can no longer parry with medium-sized shields, only small.
Wow, that's huge.
That's a big change. But other than that, it's exactly the same in every way. Same sound, same timing, same frame, same... It's taken right from Dark Souls 1 in every way. Meaning it was pretty easy to parry the standard enemies, really hard to parry the fucking spammy knights, and if you fucked up, you're gonna die. They're gonna hit you with a 6-hit combo and you're just fucking dead.
So the game was difficult though, too.
God, dude, the game was so hard. I mean, I'm bad at PvE, everyone knows that, but like, I made it to the boss. Like, I wasn't a complete pleb, but man, did the game kick my ass. I was probably the first one in our group to die. Like, yeah, it was brutal, man.
That's because you speedrun, man.
Well, yeah, exactly. I speedrun to the PvP. I was saying, I'm like, replace the fucking boss with 3 real players, and we'll see how this goes. That's what I was saying. I'm like, just give me that PvP.
That's funny.
But yeah, so that's parrying and backstabs and sword arts.
Holy shit.
So I should talk about kicking. Kicking is really interesting and actually improved. So the kick is the standard kick from Dark Souls 1. It does stability.
So guard breaking is gone then.
No. There's guard. Well, hang on. It's kind of weird.
Right.
The guard break animation is definitely gone. If you press forward R1, you kick. Yeah. But the kick obviously has a chance to break a guard, right? Like based on shield stability or if you're two-handing your weapon. Yeah, however, if you put someone into a guard break animation, you can then riposte them. So, it's like a combination of what I liked about Dark Souls 2 without giving you a dedicated guard break animation. Because I always thought that slowed down combat. That forward R1, like step forward and slap the shield, kind of thing was always awkward. I was like, that doesn't have a place, in my opinion, in the game. But now if you guard break someone, whether it's from a heavy attack or a kick or whatever the case is, you can then walk up and riposte them. You still have to be close. You still have to be, you don't have a huge window. It's a very small window to actually do it, but it goes into a full-on, like, run them through riposte animation. So I thought that was cool. Also, before I forget, there's one other really cool technique that I discovered and I was so happy for.
Was it the running thing?
The running R2.
Yeah.
So there's now sprinting R2s, and it's the jump attack. So the forward R2 that's been in every Souls game, the jump forward and slam your sword into the ground, is now activated from a full sprinting R2. And at first you're like, holy shit, that's crazy, but it actually makes perfect sense. Because think how often you use the leaping R2 attack in PvP and PvE. All the time. Well, I do. Yeah. Like, if I'm in a hallway full of enemies and I have a greatsword, I'm going to do the jumping R2 all the time, because it's generally a narrow slam attack. Or if I have the Murakumo, I'm going to use it to, like, hit everything in a cone in front of me in a wide sweeping arc. Now you can activate that at a full sprint. So now, man, PvP, like, you know how a lot of PvP is, like, unlocked running in circles and then you do the running R1?
Yeah.
Now there's the running R2, which is the fucking leap attack. So it completely turns that unlocked style of PvP, like, on its head. Which I think is cool. Now, because how many times have you tried to do a jumping R2 and you end up accidentally doing an R2?
Yeah.
And usually it's on a weapon that has a really shitty R2, like, say, a Chaos Blade in
like
Dark Souls 1. Yeah, you do the big stupid... Yeah, exactly. But now, if you want to do your big, slow, stupid R2... Or, sorry, if you want to do your leaping attack, you just do it from a full sprint, which a lot of people are always sprinting all the time. So it works locked on or unlocked. And I thought that was really, really cool. Because up until now, there's never been, well, other than Bloodborne, there's never been a running R2. You could run and you could R2, but it always stopped you and then did the full animation. Now it's, like, linked right in. Your character doesn't slow down momentum, you just leap forward and do your jump attack.
Damn, so it looks just like Dark Souls 1, the animation?
Just like Dark Souls 1, yeah.
Very cool.
But I should say that all the combinations and everything in Dark Souls 3 are strung together a lot smoother. So the example I use is like the Legion scimitars. When you're two-handing them, there's no power stance per se, but if you go R1, L1, R1...
You mean dual wielding?
Yeah, dual wielding, sorry. If you go R1, L1, R1, you actually attack faster than if you go R1, R1, R1.
Okay.
Which seems minor, but that's actually really nice, because, you think of people who would use, like, dual katanas in Dark Souls 1.
Right.
To try and bring back, like, the Demon Souls feel of the dual katana build. Yeah. But it was never quite as good, because it would just do the full R1 and L1 animation with no frames cut out.
No added bonus at all.
Exactly, but now there's definitely frames cut out. Like, you can chain them all together really nicely. Everything links together really smoothly, so combos are not only, like, viable, but they're recognizable now. When someone, like, I have a theory that the wiki is actually, in the weapon descriptions, it's actually going to have, like, combo sections, which sounds silly. It's almost like a fighting game, but, like, try the R1, R1, R2, L2 sword art combo.
To, like, speed up stuff.
Oh, yeah, and then and people are gonna, kind of like with Bloodborne, how there were awesome, like, shape change combos. Transformation combos, yeah. So, Dark Souls 3 feels like they took all the good things from Dark Souls 2's advanced combat and Bloodborne's advanced combat and put it into this game. Along with charge attacks. There are charge attacks. If you're two-handing a weapon and I guess it doesn't matter what you have, but if you hold R2, you will charge up an attack. And with, like, the Ultra Greatsword, you can hold it for, like, 3 seconds and do a huge fucking slam jam attack that sends your opponent flying. Or you can release it early and do it slightly faster. So I think PvP is going to be really crazy because you have the option to charge up attacks and, like, trick your opponents.
Right. I have a question about
Sure, by all means.
Did you use that? And if you did it have hyper armor at all at the end of it?
Yes and yes. I wasn't really paying a lot of attention to the hyper armor. What I do know is that with the Ultra Great Sword, I would be charging up an attack, and if an enemy hit me, I would get interrupted, meaning it was a very hard thing to throw in. But if I started a big, heavy R2 attack, I definitely got hyper armor.
Okay.
So it was unlikely, unless a whole bunch of enemies attacked me at once, that I was going to get interrupted after the attack started. But while I was charging up the R2, if I wasn't quick enough, yeah, I'd get mega punished.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right.
So it is cool that now there are charge attacks and essentially power stance, but like different than power stance. And yeah, so there's a lot of advanced... There's a lot of ways to kill the shit out of your opponents in Dark Souls 3, and I like that.
That's good to hear, man.
Yeah,
like,
man.
Holy shit, the depth has, like, quadrupled since the first game.
And I love that it's optional. I love that you don't have... It's like the power stancing in Dark Souls 2. You don't have to do it ever. But it just adds a different way to play. And like I said, it feels like it's catering more to PvP than it is to PvE, because you don't need it at all in PvE. But I think it's going to be the difference in PvP to
between
really
like a predictable player as in someone using like all sword art combos.
Yeah, so I'm pretty excited for that. Yeah,
that's really fucking cool.
Indeed.
Oh man, what else we got?
Let me think. Okay, so we've talked about all the like important combat mechanics that I can think of.
Backstabs, we've got parrying, sword arts.
Backstabs, parrying, poise, sword arts.
Weapons.
The different weapons. We talked about how you can kick someone into a riposte.
That's fucking awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Enemy AI is a lot more aggressive. I know we say that every game, but like enemies don't tend to run up and just stand in front of you anymore. Like in Dark Souls 1, since I played it recently and I play it all the time, I've noticed if you're just like clearing out the burg to do some PvP, half the time the enemies don't even attack you. They like walk up to you and then it's like their AI glitches and they just kind of stand in front of you and you're just like, okay, bam. Or sometimes they're just like hyper stupid aggressive and they do their big spam attack right away. In Dark Souls 3 it felt a lot more consistent, meaning the enemies like they aggro and they immediately come towards you and they attack early. Like in Dark Souls 1 I found that as long as you knew the range of your weapon, you could just attack first and kill every enemy in the game.
Yeah.
You know, you just run up and you hit R1 because you have the forward momentum and their AI doesn't click until you're within range. It's like, okay, now I can start my attack. But in Dark Souls, if you know what you're doing and you're running at something, you would just do your running R1 and catch them every time. Dark Souls 3, the enemies are ready to fucking hit you as soon as you come in range. Like, the whole sword and board, like, is kind of beneficial, again, in that you shouldn't, like... Being ultra aggressive gets you punished really hard in this game, more so than the other games I've noticed. The enemies are much more quick to react, and their pathfinding is incredible. At one point, I was in like the upper area of like a building. The part I told you earlier where I was throwing knives at a dog.
Right.
So I threw a throwing knife at a dog. I hit him. And I threw another one, hit him, and like a third one, and I hit him. And I'm like laughing because I'm just like I was laughing at how awesome the throwing knives are. Then the dog just sprints away, and I'm like, okay, whatever. So I'm trying to decide how I'm gonna clear out the rest of the room. And suddenly I hear something behind me. I turn, and the dog is fucking up in the rafters with me, like trying to bite my face off. Yeah, dude. The pathfinding on some of the enemies is awesome. Like, you can't cheese an enemy by standing on the stairs and just like plunging their head and just using a spear or whatever. Like, they're gonna find you. Like, they're gonna actually like pathfind around the stairs at a full sprint and fucking come up there and swarm you. It was a lot harder to just cheese the basic enemies in this game, which I mean I hate PvE, but I realized that to make a game harder, you have to make the enemies smarter, and damn, the enemies were smart. So yeah, I found that to be pretty cool.
That's really cool. I like PvE, so that's
yeah. I like PvE. I'm just not good at it. So
fair enough. Fair enough.
I like to do PvE with my friends because I'm a scrub. But I
my
like
God.
to fight many bad guys when it comes to actual players. Like, give me all the ganks.
Okay, so the random question that just stemmed from that.
Sure.
Did you ever unequip your weapon? Was there a fist?
There is a fist, yes. You
Okay.
can switch to a fist, and I think you can
100%.
only do it. You can only do it up until you find your first weapon,
And then you switch to the weapon.
and then you're automatically. It's just like Dark Souls 1. If you have
Yeah,
only
okay.
one weapon, you can switch to your fist. If you have two, you can't go to your fist, right?
Like, were they any good? Like, was there a move
fist.
set for them?
Lobos actually at the very end. We were all standing around.
That's
We were
what
about to leave.
reminded me of his fist only
Yeah,
speedruns, you know?
we were all standing around getting ready to leave, and Lobos was asking, he's like, can I try something really quick? So he ran over to one of the terminal and did like a fist only like little speed run thing.
Oh my god.
And you know, it does respectable damage.
What if you could spec it to do more, maybe?
Well,
or
that's the
something
theory.
Like Vanquishers.
Well, it looks like it's tied to strength because I think one class actually did more damage with their fist than the other, which leads me to believe that one of the classes starts with a higher base strength. And if it is, you know, if that is the case, a strength build with fists and perhaps an item to buff the fists or whatever might actually be viable. And who knows, there might be sword arts associated with fist.
Yeah.
Which would be crazy if you could get crazy martial... Imagine if martial arts like punch and kick combos were just built into unarmed combat. Holy shit, that would be awesome. If you didn't have to use some fucking goofy magic glove, but it was just like, no, if you don't want to use weapons, then just be Bruce Lee kind of thing. I think that would be awesome.
What did the fist moveset look like? Was it just like punchy?
It
like
looked
Dark
kind of
Souls
like the
1
Dark Souls
spammy?
1 spammy, like punch, backhand. Like there, it didn't look like there was like a 1, 2, 3 kind of like a boxing system. But again, we weren't able to unequip our left hand. We were only able to unequip the right hand. So just like in Dark Souls 2, if you only have your fist open in one hand and you have a shield in your other hand, you're not going to get all the awesome combos.
Right.
You're just going to get a stupid punch and maybe like a rolling uppercut or something. It's only when you unequip your left hand that you get all the cool like boxing combos and you start to realize how viable fists actually are. And I know this because both of us had very successful fist-only builds.
Yeah.
Mine was entirely inspired by yours, so...
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh man, that's why I was asking, because I want to punch people again.
Yeah, man, absolutely.
That felt so good.
Absolutely.
Dark Souls 2 did that right.
Yep, but I mean, Lobos is the authority on that, but it looked like he had figured something out at the end there, yeah.
Yeah, just a little random nitpick there.
Yep.
Alright, so anything else you can think of?
Okay, covered everything. I'm trying to think of like what was even option. Oh, Estus, healing.
Oh yeah, shit, that's huge.
Healing is instant.
Oh,
not instant. Not the animation is instant.
It's
Sorry,
like Dark
but
Souls 1. Right?
yeah. Your
Like,
guy
you
reaches
chug in
for
the
the
fucking
thing,
bar,
you chug, and the bar's
like,
like whoop, and it's you know, so it's an instant fill. It's not like a slow fill like Dark Souls 2, and yeah, that's pretty much it.
Can you chug twice in a row?
Yes,
like fast?
I think you can. Yes, actually, you definitely can. You can go chug and then immediately take another glug when it's like up to your mouth. So, because I know a lot of times I would get caught by enemies and I'd have to like heal in the middle of combat, and I would just spam and I go like, but you know, often I was interrupted or whatever. So, but yeah, Estus is just like Dark Souls 1 in every way.
So you don't think there's going to be like an upgrade system for Estus? Like how many do you have? Do you remember?
How many? Sorry, how many?
How many
have?
Estus flasks did you have?
10.
10. Holy
10 from the initial bonfire, yeah. I can't remember if the second bonfire would refill it only to like 5, if it was considered like upgraded or kindled or whatever, but
so it's very
every
much
time,
Dark Souls 1.
yeah, every time you started, you had your 10. No sign of life gems or anything like that. The only way to heal in the demo was with Estus.
Alright, cool.
Yeah. I mean, aside from talking about individual enemies, which is whatever, because, like, you know, every area is going to have its own individual enemies, the only things I can think of is the big knights you see in the trailer. If you're looking at the gameplay trailer, there's a few knights with, like, capes. We saw that when we saw the E3 demo. Those guys are dangerous as fuck. They're like the Black Knights from Dark Souls 1, if you're a noob and you don't know how to deal with them. Or like the Red Eye Knights from Demon Souls. They're just vicious bastards. Or even I would say they're, you know, like the Baldur Knights from Dark Souls 1, but they have a ton of health. They attack so fast. If you try to fish them, they shield bash you. And it puts you into like this huge, slow, painful guard break where they just spam
like,
you to death.
Oh my
yeah,
God.
it's bad. Like they were more dangerous in some cases than like the bosses. And there's a lot of them. There's I think 5 or 6 of them just in the starting area. They're
That's
such a pain in the dick.
terrifying.
Yeah. Thankfully, you know, just like the other Souls games, you can get to a point where you just speed run the starting area and you avoid most of the enemies. But damn, those guys were tricky. Yeah.
How was the bosses?
The bosses were cool. There was one official boss, one secret boss, and one mini boss.
You talked about the mini boss.
So the mini boss looked like Smo. He had a, you know, he's this big fat squat guy. He had a giant, like, almost like a scepter, like a big flanged mace thing that I think is what he used to cast his magic. And, you know, standard big slow troll type character, like big wide swings. You roll to his back, backstab him, and
you annihilated
shit like that.
him?
The first time, yes, and I got really cocky the next time I fought him, and he beat the shit out of me like the next 2 times, so I had to get sober again. Now keep in mind, the whole time I was playing this, I had already drank
the wine,
the equivalent of like 2 bottles of amazing red wine. So I don't think I was as sharp as I could have been had I been sober, but you know, I still got the gist of it. The boss which you saw at E3, the Dancer of the Frigid Valley.
Yeah.
Really cool boss with fancy pants, dancy attacks. Big, long, like snaky kind of Voldo type character. You can see it in the trailer with like a veil, and it had 3 stages. It had a stage where it just attacks you. The second stage, it buffs one sword, and the third stage, it buffs both swords. One with blue flame and one with red flame, as far as I could tell. Maybe it was ice and fire. I don't know.
Yeah, something like that.
And the mini boss. So there was a secret boss that looked kind of like the boss. Like it had like a very snaky kind of appearance, and it was a knight. It was almost, from what I remember, it was almost like if the elite knight was combined with the Dancer of the Frigid Valley. So it looked like a standard knight, but it was all hunched over and like crawling towards you. It was really creepy. Like really like Japanese horror inspired. Like a lot of the enemies like crawl towards you even though they look like they should be standing up straight and just like noble knights, which is really fucked up.
That's fucked up.
But it had a status effect called Frostbite. And we couldn't tell what it did, but it filled up a bar on your screen, and when it maxed out, you didn't take any damage, nothing happened, but we think you took more damage from his attack, so it was like almost like a weakness debuff. That was the only status effect we saw in the demo. There was no poison as far as we can tell, or anything else like that, or bleed or anything like that, but there was a frostbite status effect that came from the secret boss. Yeah. So
interesting.
Yeah, so 3 bosses in the starting area. 1 actual boss with like a fog gate and a health bar. 1 mini boss, the like a Smo looking motherfucker, and then another like secret mini boss that also didn't have like a big health bar but had all sorts of fancy attacks.
Cool, but now that you say there's Smo is confirmed, we can confirm the very, very old Dragon Slayer, right?
Yes. Okay. And let's not forget the
Rainbow Smelters.
The Rainbow Smelter and the 3 Poison Smelters that you actually talk to, and they accompany you on your quest. Yeah, they're your best friends, and they have horrendous AI and pathfinding and everything. And you have to like tell them, you have to issue them commands, so you have to tell one to like wait here and the next one to go and patrol and stuff, and then if you get too far away from one, it starts crying and you have to go back and apologize to it, and it's, you know, very Resident Evil 4 with like the escort missions. So that's all confirmed 100%. You heard it here from us.
Yep, absolutely. Rainbow Smelter.
But yeah, I honestly think that is all the major stuff. Everything else can be more or less deduced from the trailer. There's torches that are, you know, a left-hand item as far as we can tell. It probably has a timer built into the menu as well, but I didn't see one on the actual interface.
One last question.
Sure.
So I obviously everyone saw the gameplay trailer.
It's on. It's been looping on the screen for like an hour. So
yeah, for like 10 million hours. You better have watched.
Oh yeah, dude.
Yeah. Okay, so like I noticed on the boss fight they show when the guy gets hit.
Yep.
There is the instant recovery from Bloodborne returning as well.
Oh, like the
You can like hop back on your feet. If you
what is that? Teching or whatever? Like almost like a fighting game tech roll.
That's exactly it.
I think if you spam circle or B or whatever on impact, you might get up faster.
Do you think that makes the game easier?
I think it makes the game less frustrating maybe and more responsive. It might make the game easier because you can recover quicker, but I think getting up faster also means less invincibility frames when you're down. So if you think of all the times you've been saved by the enemies using their super spammy mega attack when you're on the ground, it might not actually be as good as everyone thinks. So I think, there might be, like I see that now on the trailer you were talking, I just saw it. And you can recover fairly quickly, but for better or worse, right? Sometimes those invincibility frames you have as you're laying on your back on the ground are necessary to avoid like a firestorm or a dragon breath or a huge mega ground slam attack because
it might be harder
safe,
to like hit people on the wake up.
Exactly, and yeah, I mean in PvP obviously I think that's going to be very helpful because what would be nice is if it is in PvP, and again we're just speculating, this might help you avoid the possibility of like a chain backstab or some other sneaky wake up combustion R2 whatever the case is. So yeah, I think that will definitely be.
That's really.
Yeah, I'm glad you noticed that because I never really picked up on that.
Yeah, I saw that. And I was like,
I mean, if I get knocked down, I panic and I mash circle and stuff to roll away, and maybe that is a sped up thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's. I'm just watching the trailer just to see if there's anything I might have missed, but like it all looks pretty good.
I think we covered just about everything.
Yeah, I think the only thing you're not gonna see from like this trailer, obviously, is any of the interface menu kind of like HUD stuff. Right. And I think I covered that in pretty good detail.
It was just like Dark Souls 1 then.
Just like Dark Souls 1, except it had a sword art number. Not a meter, but like it said the number 20 on top of like what I remember to be like a little shield icon. Or maybe it was a sword. It was some sort of icon, and then as you used it, it went down. And I saw no way to replenish it other than dying.
Alright.
Yeah. So that is everything.
Holy shit. Well, thank you.
No problem, man.
First of all, for all the information. I'm sure everyone, including myself, found it to be hype as fuck. I mean,
hell yeah.
Everyone's already excited for the game. This isn't helping.
Yeah, and somehow, like, if you guys are watching this on my channel, DreadedCone, make sure you go check out Ouroboros the Ninja if you haven't already. Or youtube.com/Ouroboros the Ninja or twitch.tv/Brandon505. I'm sure if you've heard of one of us, you've probably heard of the other, but if not, definitely check out the other. And obviously, if you're on Brandon's channel, you can find me at just youtube.com/DreadedCone or twitch.tv/DreadedCone.
Yep, 10 out of 10 best streamer.
Yeah, thanks, man. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope it was informative for anyone that was looking for advanced shit. Like I said, this is not. We tried to keep it in like a lot of our audience takes these games a little too seriously, including myself, and we like to know what we're getting into, and we like to know how deep all of this can go to see how long it's going to last. So hopefully by giving you guys an idea of some of the more like advanced stuff, it'll just spark your hopefully it'll just keep the hype train rolling until the game actually releases, which the rumor is it's going to be March of 2016. And from my, secret inside sources, I was more or less able to confirm that there will probably be a network test of some kind.
No way.
Yeah, in either December or January. Just like there has been for Dark Souls 2. Yeah, there was for Dark Souls 2 and there was for Bloodborne. There was like an alpha.
Yeah, that's true.
And then, that's more or less what the rumor is. And we're looking at probably end of first quarter release, which is March of 2016. And yeah, that's that. Cool.
Alrighty.
Is that everything?
Well, yeah, that's everything. Thanks again so much, Ty.
No problem, man. And
for answering all my questions.
yeah, if we stumble across anything else,
hope that covers most of everything that everyone wanted.
Absolutely. And if you guys have any other questions, throw them in the comment sections of either of our videos, and we'll see what we can dig up. Sweet. All right, man. Well, I'm out of here, but thanks for hanging out, and we'll chat again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
No problem. Later, man.
Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.